Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging around at the end of a very long day. Thank you to the organizers, to, hang on, those amazing sponsors there who put this day together. As you heard, I do this professionally, and for volunteers, you guys have absolutely blown me away. Like, that's really great. For those who haven't met me yet, as you heard, my name's Kris. Despite the accent, I have lived in this country for 16 years now. I'm originally from the US, I live in Sydney. I've been working in tech for longer than that. I was a developer, I was a business analyst, I was a people leader. I've worked in companies like Epson, Channel 9, Canva, and now I work for Yao. And luckily for Yao, I get to come to Perth really regularly, which is great because you guys have such a vibrant dev community. I mean, I've been here 3 days on this trip, and I've already been to 2 different meetups. Including the new Junior Dev meetup, which just launched. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. It was really great. I love seeing it. As for DDD, this is the first one I've ever been to, much less spoken at, so congratulations, Perth. And it's been fantastic. I've been tweeting a storm. I'm web_goddess if you want to tweet me during this. But have you guys all enjoyed yourself today, I hope? Yeah? Good. Inspired. Well, I'm not going to tax your brain too much here because I know you had a lot to think about. So I want you to just a little thought exercise. Just imagine that we're going to go for a nice walk together. A nice chatty walk. We're friends. We're going for a little ramble in the bush. You know, the sky is blue, the trees are green, the birds are tweeting. And that image you see is very vivid for me because I've just come back from holiday. Where I was lucky enough to spend some time in the US with my family on vacation in Yellowstone National Park. And folks, it was breathtaking. Like, I took that photo with like a 3-year-old iPhone, and it's still just that gorgeous. If you've never heard of Yellowstone, it's in the state of Wyoming in the US. It's about 150 years old. It was the first national park in America, pretty much the first national park in the world. And among other things, it is famous for being the site of the largest supervolcano on the North American continent. A fact my dad reminded us of like every 15 minutes. And because it's in a caldera, it's got really cool geothermal features. You know, it's got mud pots and the grand prismatic spring we hiked up to see, and the Old Faithful geyser. Really cool wildlife. Like, we saw bears and moose and coyotes and bald eagles and so many bison, so many bison. And like I said, pristine, beautiful. And after like a day, I realized that was kind of weird a little bit. Like, I can tell you, I can honestly count on one hand the number of pieces of litter that I saw in Yellowstone. And I looked it up. There were 4 million people who visited that park last year, okay? So how does it look that way? How has it been so well preserved for us to visit? I don't think the National Park Service has like an army of employees who come out at night like Oompa Loompas, you know, or like Disneyland and clean it up. They just don't have the budget, especially not under the current administration. So I thought about this, like how does this happen? And it finally, the answer occurred to me, you know, light bulb. It's because of a real active group effort on the part of everybody who visits there. Everybody who goes there to keep the park looking the way that it does. And I realized it's the campsite rule, literally in action. Hey, that's the title of my talk. If you're not familiar with it, so there was this guy named Lord Baden-Powell, and he started the Scouts movement back in the early 20th century. And in his last letter to the organization in 1941, he gave them a bit of advice, which has sort of been passed down in scouting lore as part of their core values. And that advice was this: leave this world a little better than you found it. It's very simple. It's been come to be known as the campsite rule, or Boy Scout rule, but I prefer campsite rule. And the cool thing is it's actually been applied to other domains. So some of you may know that it's been applied to computer programming. In 2008, Uncle Bob Martin, who came out to Australia last year, I got to meet at Yale, in his book Clean Code, he said, what if anytime you checked out a module, because in 2008 they were still doing that, anytime you checked out a module of your company's code, you improved it before you checked it back in. Imagine that. Like, you don't have to make it perfect, you just have to make it a little bit better. You know, refactor something, change the name of a variable to be something better. Imagine that your code then, your whole team's code would continually improve, it wouldn't deteriorate. This is how teams get better. And he actually likened it to common decency. He said that leaving the code base messy should be as socially unacceptable as littering. I really like that. Now, it's also been applied to human relationships. The columnist Dan Savage has said that if you're in a relationship where you are the more experienced person, It is your moral responsibility to make sure that the less experienced person comes out of that relationship physically, emotionally, in as good a state as they went in, if not better, which is really nice too. Now, in terms of the great outdoors, it's pretty obvious. It means things like tread lightly. Take out the stuff you brought in with you. Make sure you don't leave anything behind. Clean up the campground. And the cool thing was in Yellowstone, like, I don't remember seeing that written anywhere. Like, it wasn't on like the archway when we drove into the park, you know. I just kind of picked up on it. Like Uncle Bob says, it's common decency. When I saw the litter on the ground, I actually picked it up and put it in the bin. Nobody had to tell me to do that. And I could see other people doing it too. I mean, damn sure my family didn't leave anything behind. And that actually made me feel good. Like, it actually made me feel part of something bigger. Like I was part of the grand tradition of all the people who visited that beautiful environment and who worked together to keep it that way. So I had a lovely, lovely week offline. And I do mean offline, like they don't have Wi-Fi, there's very little cell service, our cabins didn't even have TVs in them, Steve. No. So it was pretty much just nature and sleeping and food, and it was great. I was so rested and relaxed. And I needed that. Because when I got back to civilization, I did the thing that you would all do. I turned on my phone, I opened my laptop, and reality came crashing back in. It's no secret that if you spend a lot of time online these days, your mental health can suffer. You know, it can be depressing. It's a new dumpster fire like every single day. And I actually think those of us working in tech have it worse than other people because it's harder for us to escape. You know, the internet is where we make our living, where some of us have devoted significant portions of their working life to creating this thing. And some days that thing can really suck. Like, does anybody else flinch when they get one of these? This one was just last week. I mean, Troy Hunt, national treasure, we can all agree, but I am so sick of getting these emails. I am so sick of crappy, insecure websites, you know, with bad security practices, whether through laziness or incompetence. I'm tired of bots and black hats and foreign actors who are, you know, maliciously going after our data, trying to compromise our information. Did you guys see the news about the Equifax data breach last week in the US? 143 million people had their personal data compromised, nearly half the population of the US, and almost certainly including me. And then there's IoT, you know, IoT where the S stands for security. You know, we had a Yao talk just a few months ago where Kris told me a story that there was a casino in the US that got hacked through its Wi-Fi-enabled fish tank. Like, it's bad enough I have to worry if my dishwasher has a directory traversal bug. Now I have to firewall my fish tank. Security is like an arms race these days, and a lot of the time it feels like we're losing. And then there's Silicon Valley, you know, which is supposed to be the pinnacle of our industry. It is the shining epitome of everything we over here should be striving to be, right? We're the brightest minds of our generation, are reinventing the public bus, but, you know, without poor people, and flogging $400 Wi-Fi-enabled juicers. Yeah, he closed the company down recently, but they got $119 million in funding. Just 2 days ago, I had to update this talk. A new startup called Bodega launched in the US, in Silicon Valley, with the goal of replacing mom-and-pop corner stores with essentially vending machines. Because that's a target ripe for disruption. Locally owned small businesses, mainly owned by immigrants. You know, why bother talking to an actual human being when you can just grab your bottle of Soylent from a glorified minibar? I actually had to laugh. I saw somebody on Twitter refer to it as Brodega. The founders, of course, are massively backpedaling, but this is a pattern that we see over and over again. In Silicon Valley, there is always a technical solution, no matter what the social problem, no matter what the human consequences are. But the news is really what makes me want to just burn it all down. There are literal Nazis wearing Pepe the Frog pins, using the internet that we all helped create to coordinate protests in towns that look like the one that I grew up in. Up until yesterday, Facebook's algorithms let you target ads to anti-Semitic groups, and would helpfully suggest you throw in the gun nuts while you're at it. The current US administration is doing everything it can to roll back net neutrality, to strip healthcare from millions of people, and to enshrine religious discrimination as immigration policy, all while the president tries to start World War III on Twitter. And here in Australia, it's not like we can escape it. We've got the NBN debacle dragging on year after year. We've got every day, oh, a new member of parliament. Whoops, I'm a dual citizen. And now the vicious campaigning we're seeing over the postal plebiscite, non-binding postal survey that none of us actually wanted in the first place. And then if it's a really good day, I get to read a manifesto about how I'm biologically unfit to work in the industry I've spent the last 20 years in. Friends, these are the dark days when I want to quit everything and become Amish. This is the tech industry I've devoted my entire working life to, and some days I really don't like what I see. And I realize this is getting a bit heavy, considering I promised you a gentle walk and a chat. And let's be clear, I think, cleaning up a few pieces of litter in a park are one thing, and fixing all of that is entirely another. Like, cleaning up the issues in the tech industry is no small thing. There is no quick solution. I am not going to stand here and try to tell you personally to do anything about that stuff. Although if you can, please do, write more secure websites, build algorithms that don't encode discrimination, support diversity programs, punch a fucking Nazi, I'm not condoning violence. But the bigger issue, as I see it, is the sort of psychological toll that pile of litter takes on us. It's just there every day when we open our computers. A reminder of how far this industry is from the awesome place that we all know that it can be. And that can make you feel helpless and depressed. It can make you feel really stressed. And if your job is already stressful, that is a recipe that leads to burnout. So, quick poll. How many of you would say that you have burnt out at one time or another in your career, for whatever value of burnt out? That's what I thought. I have been there too. I left the industry for a couple of years, in fact, before I came back. I know plenty of other people who quit and who didn't come back. And I know plenty of people who stayed and took a toll on their health and on their relationships. When good people in this industry leave, we all suffer. We cannot fix those problems without everybody. We need everybody in and at the top of their game. So how do you stave off burnout? How do you stay motivated and energized in the face of that mountain of litter? Okay, now Padma helpfully talked about some strategies in her talk earlier, and I'm going to take you through some of the ones that work for me personally. The big one is sleep. Most of us don't get enough sleep. There was a fantastic talk a few months back in Melbourne by Jamie Skella about the productivity myth. And it's on YouTube, you should look it up. And he quoted a neuroscientist as saying that sleep is the single most effective thing you can do to reset your brain and body. So please, everybody, get a good night's sleep tonight. You can physically get away, like I did, Go on vacation. It works, but it's not cheap, and most of us are limited in how often we can do that. You can participate in tech events like this. I find that feeling part of a community really makes me feel a sense of purpose. And I'm fortunate now because of my job with Yao, that's basically my job. A couple weeks out of the year, I get to spend time with some of the nicest, smartest people in the industry, people like Goyko, But again, I get that that's difficult. Not everybody lives in a place that has, meetups happening all the time. Not everybody has a family situation where they can get away, go to conferences or to meetups every night. You may have a lower tolerance for eating pizza and beer at every meal than I do. You can work on a passion project or a hobby, whether tech or otherwise. I have had a fan website for the children's author Roald Dahl for 20 years now. I also knit and sew, as you heard, which gets me away from the keyboard. Maybe you're into video games, or Sam Ritchie told me today he bakes bread. You might do CrossFit or work on an open source project. All of that stuff can be a release valve. It can be a way for you to relax away from the tensions of your day job. And there's one last one, which is the thing I'm going to talk the most about here in my talk today, because it's been the single biggest source of happiness and satisfaction for me in my career in the industry for the last few years. And that thing is mentoring. So all that other stuff is great for you personally. It'll help you feel better, for your health and your well-being. But mentoring has the added benefit of actually improving the industry. It's how you can put the campsite rule into action right now. And I'm going to tell you how. So again, I'm going to do another poll here. How many of you would say that you have a mentor? Okay? How many of you want a mentor? Yeah? And how many of you are a mentor? Okay. Now, whenever I talk about mentoring, the response I get is that very few people think they're qualified to be mentors. Almost everybody wants one, but nobody knows how to actually get one. So I am going to tell you how today. My goal for the remainder of this talk is for you to leave with some concrete, actionable steps to get yourself involved with mentoring. I'm going to start on the mentee side, since it seems like there were more people who were looking for a mentor. Now, like many of you, this was the image I had of mentoring up till a few years ago. You know, this wise sage on the mountaintop that would dispense wisdom and tell you what to do in your career. And of course, everybody wants that, like who wouldn't? That's a myth. That's the myth that I want to dispel, because mentors come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and you probably have several right now in your life and you don't even realize it. So this slide came from a Women Who Code Singapore meetup I went to earlier this year, and we were having a discussion about mentors and how to find them. And we started by listing everything that we could think of that mentors did, and sort of categorizing them. We came up with a lot of different things. So some mentors are just there to inspire you. You know, they're like a role model. It might be someone like Goiko, who you see at an event or who's written a book that you like. And they just provide a vision for your career that you want to emulate. You might not even know them. There are mentors who give you career guidance, and that's probably the closest to that sage on a mountaintop ideal, you know? That's someone from the industry who's been there, you know? They can help you see the big picture, help you make actionable steps to get where you want to go in your career, and provide accountability on getting there. There are also mentors who help you with the day-to-day aspects of your job. We call them tech mentors here, but I think a better name is probably coaches. You know, so it doesn't necessarily have to be tech. This could be someone that you pair program with. It could be, you know, a senior developer in your company. Maybe an old colleague in the industry that you catch up with every now and then, that you share, you know, advice and ask questions to. It could even be a Slack community. You know, I think the Vendors Slack community here in Perth is a great example of this. Some mentors go above and beyond just giving you advice. They actually advocate on your behalf, and we've called them champions. I've also heard the term sponsors, and these are fantastic. This is someone who not just will give you some tips, but will actively suggest you for roles and give you referrals. They're actually really great. And lastly, there are your peers, and people always discount peers, and you know, you shouldn't. Like your friends, your colleagues, the people on your team, the people around you at this event are your peers. They share your frustrations, and you can talk to them and get advice and ideas. Now the cool thing is there is no limit to how many mentors you can have, and you can have mentors from all of these different groups. You probably have some now. And sometimes even a single person can fulfill multiple roles here. It's okay to still want to have a formal mentor though, you know, someone you can actually point to and say, that's my mentor. So I have one. I've had a formal mentor for about a year now. We meet up every month or so to talk about like current challenges I'm facing, questions that I have, you know, how to get to the next stage of my career, stuff like that. So how do you get one? There are a few different ways you can do that. If your company has a mentoring program, take advantage of it. Like it's mostly big ones who do, but you should, you know. Ideally, you'll get paired up with someone outside of your reporting lines. Like you don't want to do someone that you know, report to, but if you have one in your office, do it. There are also external mentoring programs, you know. Maybe your university alumni group offers one. You can check with them. A lot of them do. There are also industry bodies. I know ACS has a mentoring program. If you're more on the people leadership side, I think AICD has a mentorship program. There are several. There are even LinkedIn groups, I believe, who do this. There are also some private bodies who do it. I know that there is a group, ladies, called Mentor Walks. Sadly, not in Perth yet, but in other Australian cities where you get paired up with a mentor and you go for walks together. And there's also a company I found called Everwise that actually provide big corporate enterprise mentoring programs. They also do, you can also just volunteer to be a mentor or get a mentor with them too. Or of course, you can just ask somebody. And that is the hardest one, by far. So I thought I would tell you the story of how I got my mentor. So my mentor is someone that I saw speak at a tech event about 5 years ago, and they just went straight into that like inspired bucket. I was just like, oh my God, I want to be her when I grow up. You know, like her career was one I wanted to emulate, clearly really smart, very confident, knew what she was doing, seemed like someone who would have all the answers. And I just went, total girl crush. So I kind of just stalked her. Like I couldn't even get up the courage to like talk to her. You know, a few years later, I connected with her on LinkedIn, and she accepted, and that was like really exciting. That was like the closest I got. But I just thought, look, By this point, she was a C-level at like a big Australian company. I'm like, she has no time for me. Who am I? Like, there's no way she's got time to meet up with me and listen to my dinky problems. And then about 18 months ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was telling her I was at a career crossroads. Like, I kind of didn't know what I was going to do, and I could really use a mentor. And she goes, you should talk to. You should totally talk to this person. I was like, I know, right? I have been stalking her for years, but why would she talk to me? Like, And she's like, A, you're an idiot. And B, I'm going to give you some advice. And she gave me the best tip. It is that one weird tip for getting a mentor. And I'm now going to share it with you. This is what she told me to do. Ideally, you have some relationship with the person. You're not a complete stranger. She's like, what you do is you send her an email. You say, hi, blah, 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 I'm at this sort of career crossroads. I'm looking for a mentor right now. Ideally, my mentor would have all of these categories. Of course, you would be ideal. But I know that you, Julie, are so busy in your schedule. So I really want to know if you had 5 minutes of your time where we could get a coffee and you could suggest some potential mentors for me. And I was like, that is genius. Because it gives them an out. It gives them an out to say, and that was what I did. I felt embarrassed at making her reject me, and that took it away. So instead it's like, well, worst case scenario now, she actually gives me some names of potential mentors. Like, that's not too bad. Best case scenario, what happens in my case, and what I imagine happens in most cases, is you meet with the person and they end up becoming your mentor. So there you go, that is my top tip for you. My only regret now is that I didn't reach out to her earlier. Because she's now gone through the categories. Like, she was inspiration, now she's a career mentor, and actually now that we've been seeing her for like a year, she's moved into the sponsor stage. Like, she's actually now referring me for stuff, which is fantastic. And when I told her how I'd been like, too embarrassed to ask her for you, she was like, you're an idiot. You should have just asked me years ago. So that's my advice, don't wait. So once you find one, once you find a mentor, I just wanted to mention a few things you can do to set yourself up for success. These are things you often talk about the first time you meet with them. If you want to be really formal about it, they're actually on the internet, like formal mentoring documents you can download. We didn't bother with any of that, but you can do one too. The first thing is to establish the goals. The best mentoring conversation I ever had was like this young guy, junior developer, who walked in and went, I'm a junior, I've been doing this for 2 years, I want to be a senior. How do I get there? Easy peasy, like we can talk about concrete steps you can do. My goals had changed. That was the tricky bit. When my first meeting with my mentor, I was in my last role and I was sort of on a different path. And by the time we met again, I'd accepted my role with Yale and things had entirely changed. And so I actually said to her, I explained the situation, and I was like, look, I'm not necessarily in the same place that you were when we agreed to this, so if you want to just sort of like call it, that's fine. And she's like, no, don't be stupid, it's fine. But it's good to have that sort of very clear. Also be clear on expectations, like for how you're going to meet up. Are you going to have Skype chats? Are you going to meet in person? How frequently? And what methods of communication to work? If this is a sort of important person, you might have to go through an EA. Are you allowed to call them and email them? You may even want to set an end date, say that we'll do this relationship for like a year. That way they're not committing to something entirely open-ended, and then you can sort of review at that point. You should be really respectful of their time, don't be late, don't cancel on them at the last minute, don't badger them with questions in between sessions. A big one is if they give you some advice, you should follow it. Like when she tells me to do something, I make a note, and then usually the next time we meet up, I tell her about how I did with that. Like that's just nice and respectful, that's what they're there for. And if they do refer you for something, realize how great that is. They're putting their reputation on the line for you. So you should do everything you can to make them look good. You gotta be open to feedback and really let go of your ego. And this can get hard. Like I was talking to some with mentors, a lot of like entrepreneurs. They said it's just painful. They come in and they give you their business idea and you poke holes in it. And it's just crushing. But a mentor is not about just giving you validation. That's what they're there for. They're there to actually tell you about all the places this could go wrong. So, try to not get too invested in that. And lastly, set the agenda. Like unless you are in sort of like a big corporate program, you're probably not going to have a structured format for these sessions, And it's very tempting to fall into that trap again of just thinking, well, they're the wise sage. They will tell me how this mentoring thing is supposed to work. Instead, you have to do it. You have to get the most out of the relationship. And since I'm sure there are plenty of introverts here who are just cringing at the thought of this conversation, I will give you some ideas for things that you can talk about with your mentor. Just try and build a rapport with them, I would say off the bat. Ask them about the career path. Ask them about the company they work in, why they chose it, why they like it, how they spend an average day, what challenges they've faced. Basically, get to try to know them as a person and build some trust. If you've got concrete career goals, like that junior engineer who wanted to be a senior engineer, discuss steps you could take, Are there particular books or courses that you should look into that will get you to the next level? Are there professional organizations and events that you should check out? There's a ton of events and meetup groups. They can help you filter out the ones that are actually good. Are there people you should connect with? That's a big one. That's where you actually start growing your network through them. You could ask them to review your CV. That can always be really helpful. You could ask them to even do a mock interview with you, especially if you have a particular role you're going for. And depending on how formal you are, you might want to document these activities. You might want to set time frames and follow up on them for accountability. Another thing you can do, and it's the thing that I tend to do the most with my mentor, is just ask for help and advice whenever I'm having a problem. Maybe like a dilemma at work or an opportunity you're considering. Basically lay out the situation and say, what would you do if you were me? I do that one a lot. All right. So hopefully that gives you some good ideas about what kind of mentors there are, how you can find one, and how you can get the most out of it. So now for those of you who are a little bit further on in your career, I'm going to talk about the flip side. Actually being a mentor. I kind of came to being a mentor by accident, I think. I was doing it for a really long time before I realized that I was. Most of my mentoring came about through my involvement with the Sydney Girl Geek Dinners chapter. I started going to this meetup several years ago, just going to meet up, getting to know people. And eventually, after 4 years, they did their first hackathon. And they were like, hey, would you mind giving a little talk on how to pitch your hack, how to do the presentation part? And I was honestly, it's a little bit like this talk. I don't feel like it's necessarily anything but common sense. I don't consider myself an expert on that topic. But I was sort of like, okay. So I gave the talk, and people they flipped out. They were so nice about it. And they've asked me back to do it every year since. So that sort of got me into doing talks there. And then I started getting questions from people in the group. They'd come up, can I ask you, about your career or this company I'm thinking of going to work for? There's email me, send me, tweets. And then pretty soon people outside the group were asking me to go to lunch, have a coffee, get some advice on their job or their startup. And then just in the last year, I've started actually talking to whole groups of people. I've actually given some talks at UNSW, at Coder Academy, and talking to people who are just coming up in the industry. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of different ways to be a mentor that aren't like a formal, you are the wise sensei, You probably are a mentor right now to people and you just don't call it that. So if you want to start down the mentoring path, I recommend you start small and work up like I did. So just generally be active in the community, be active in your company, be generous with your knowledge and your time, make it clear that you're open to questions from newbies, that they can come to you and talk to you and you will give them your time. Go to meetups if you can and talk to people outside of just your circle of friends. Find the person off on their own and talk to them. If you can't go to meetups, consider joining a Slack community like Vendors or ViewSource or something like that, or an online community, Stack Overflow, whatever. That'll eventually lead to informal mentoring, which is just people reaching out to you for help. I've also heard it called implicit mentoring. It's not a big deal. You don't even have to call it the dreaded M word. It's just helping people. It's just being nice. Then there's group mentoring, which, the easiest step is probably giving talks. Submit for DDD Perth next year. Speak at a meetup. There are also tons of groups who need technical people to help. In Sydney, we have Node Girls, you have Perth Web Girls here, there are Django Girls, stuff like that. Those are all about getting women into programming. You do not have to be an expert to help someone who's never written a for loop, okay? And it would be intensely gratifying, I promise you that, I've done it. You can go to hackathons. Hackathons, trust me, some hackathons are sad because they don't have enough technical people. Go in, join a team, and you can really help some people out with their technical skills through doing that. You could even offer to speak to students, reach out to your uni, reach out to people at GA, Coder Academy. You could even start a study group or join a study group. And then there's formal mentoring, if you think you're ready to take that step. Again, check with your company in case they have a program you can put your hand up for. Goes for your university alumni as well, industry groups you're in. You can also just let people know that you're willing to do this. On the Girl Geek Slack channel a year ago, one of the women just went, I have this as my personal KPI this year to do some mentoring, so I am willing to take on a mentee. My expertise is in XYZ, if anyone's interested. And like 10 people put their hand up immediately. She had a mentee within like 5 minutes. And I can tell you from Thursday night that there are 90 people at the Junior Dev Meetup right now who would love to have you as their mentor. Go along, tell them you're willing. There you go, LJ. Now, I know it kind of sounds like maybe mentoring is a lot of work with no upside. But the mentor actually gets a lot out of it, you know? First and foremost, you get confidence. Something, what is it, like 70% of us have imposter syndrome, you know? Like I said, I don't know why I'm standing up here in front of you guys. None of this is new. But by telling stuff to people, by helping them out, by teaching them things, you get more confident in your own abilities. It's just amazing. You get perspective on your own problems. Everyone has this tendency to think that whatever you're going through is unique, you know, in your company, and it's not. The more you talk to other people in other companies, the more you realize there's nothing new. Everybody else is going through the same stuff. You get better communication skills, you know, when you're teaching someone who's just starting out, you have to get good at explaining your ideas in different ways. You have to learn how to have your ideas received and understood by the mentee. And that can lead to developing leadership skills. You know, I think a lot of tech people are interested in maybe moving into a leadership role. And leadership isn't so much about what you do, it's about influencing other people and communication. So mentoring can be a really good stepping stone and give you an idea of what that actually feels like. Mentoring can give you, you know, you can learn stuff. It can give you exposure to technology, to trends and things that you don't actually use in your day job. It can allow you to pay it back. That's one for me. You know, I had a lot of people help me out in my career when I started, and it feels really nice to actually pay that back and pass it on. And lastly, just I think as human beings, connecting with other people and helping them feels really nice. Like you get a massive buzz when you see someone do something that they didn't think they could ever do. So mentoring isn't just altruism or charity. It is a two-way street. You get as much out of it as you put into it. Plus the satisfaction, as I said, of living the campsite rule. Mentoring will give you an immediate, tangible opportunity to make the industry better. And I don't think a lot of you guys realize the difference you can have, the impact you can make right now, no matter how far along your career you are. And I'm just we're getting to the end of my ramble today. I'm going to give you an example from my own experience as a mentor to show you exactly what kind of a difference you can make. So earlier this year, I was giving a talk at Coder Academy in Sydney. And so this is a 6-month certificate course. These people have given up 6 months of their lives, a lot of money, because they want so badly to be in this industry. And so I gave them a talk, and then we had Q&A at the end. And this one guy raised his hand, and I said, yeah, what is it? And he said, how intense is it in the industry? I was like, what do you mean, how intense is it? Like, you know, it's a job, like, yeah, it's more intense at sometimes than others, but I'm like, you've been in this intense thing, like, it won't be as intense as your course has been. And he was like, you mean we don't have to code 24/7 and have a side hustle and stay up till 2 a.m. every night? And I was like, where in the world did you get that idea? And he said, the mentor we had last week. And I was flabbergasted. Like, these people wanted so badly to be web developers, and they were already scared and freaked out about the stress and demand. They didn't even have real jobs yet. And another mentor had told that. Someone had sold them on the myth that overworking is the only way to succeed. Now, look, we all did that when we were younger. You know, I did that. I worked 12-hour days. I sent emails way too late at night. I thought we were collectively moving past that. But I guess it's not the case. Just 2 days ago, my friend Mike Sharp in Sydney tweeted a link to this job ad. This is a real job ad. Read the bolded bit. 70 to 90 hours a week. And they are proud. This team is proud about driving people to burnout. It's part of their culture fit. You know, so this myth is not dead. So standing there in front of that room of junior developers, I did the only thing I could think of in response. I told them that mentor was full of shit. I told them that it was exploitative. I told them that it was wrong and they should not accept any roles in any companies that would expect that of them. You know? And honestly, if I saved any one of them from taking a job like this, that makes me very happy. And that right there is one of the ways that I think you can have a major impact as a mentor. By calling out those damaging myths and behaviors that we've all been through, that we know hurt the industry and the people who work in it. So there's some other myths, just briefly. The one that you have to be a full stack developer. that you have to know everything. You know, Joel Khalifa coined the term full stack anxiety, which is the stress brought on by companies and recruiters who expect to hire unicorns who can do everything. No one can know everything. It's okay to be a specialist. Around Mandy, where's Mandy? Mandy wrote a Medium post the other day, which has gone a bit viral, where she talked about the idea that people who only write HTML and CSS are devalued in the industry in favor of people who write JavaScript. It's really good. You should go read it. But it's perfectly fine to specialize. And that leads me to the next one. That contempt culture is acceptable. I learned that term at LinuxConf back in January. There was a great talk from Oren Shaw about contempt culture. Contempt culture is that thing we do where we signal how much we belong to the tribe by flaming somebody else, by putting them down. You know, how many of you have been to a meetup where somebody made a joke about PHP? You know, I've done it, and I was a PHP developer. You know. And that's why earlier today in Nathan's talk, he put up PHP as a slide, and I just braced myself for it. And he didn't. He didn't. He actually talked about it as a mature technology that people have used for, you know, particular decisions. And, you know, Oren talked about the fact that, like, that's how you learn as a junior developer to fit in, is by putting down other people's, you've got that phone? What are you, an idiot? You know, that's via Emacs, tab spaces, whatever you want, you know. And it's really othering to people who are starting out, you know, to actually tell them you're not a real developer because you obviously, you know, you choose to use that. You don't know how you're not a real programmer. That's incredibly damaging. It keeps people out. It puts people off, you know. There is a myth that tech is a meritocracy. You know, we like to think that. We like to think that it doesn't matter who you are, you can come from anywhere, as long as you've got the skills, you can succeed in this industry. And therefore the fact that we've all succeeded means that we deserve it, right? And that's a really dangerous road to go down. You know, they've done studies that just changing the name on a CV can impact whether or not that person gets called in for an interview. And there are so many other factors that go into whether or not you get that dream job in the industry. You shouldn't just assume that the person got there based on pure technical merit, or that tech merit is the only thing that we look for in the people that we work with. And lastly, there's that belief that tech can solve every problem. You know, I get that. We like it. That's what we like to do. We like to play with it. Tech is our hammer, and therefore everything looks like the nail, you know? And that leads people to thinking things like hackathons are the way to fix homelessness. And, you know, I have sympathy for that, but, you know, I think with complex social issues, building them an app is not always the best solution. And, you know, it can also lead to us thinking that what we do is so much more important than people who actually care for other human beings. Now, if you've been in this industry for any length of time, you can tell from the laughter, you know how damaging these beliefs are. You know that they lead to the burnout that almost all of us, you know, have been through. And without intervention, the next generation, those 90 junior developers, they will go through all this the same road we did. By mentoring, we can break that cycle. We can tell people starting out that we tried all that stuff and it's crap, it doesn't work. You know, we can call out companies that like try to exploit us, that profit off these myths and beliefs and you know, prop them up. We can make this environment, this tech industry that we love, better for everybody. And that is my challenge for you all today. Now, I have wandered pretty far on our little walk. Perhaps the landscape wasn't always quite as pretty as I imagined. As I promised. We've talked about the campsite rule, how it applies to different domains, how working to improve a system can be both a moral responsibility but also make you feel really good. We talked about ways that the tech industry can suck, that it can wear you down, that it can burn you out, and that there are different strategies everybody can use to deal with that. We've talked about particular benefits of mentoring and specifics about how you can get involved on both sides of that practice. You do not have to be or look for a wise sensei on a mountaintop. All of us can benefit by forming these relationships, no matter how far you are into your career. And just by like picking up litter in a national park, we need to call out harmful behaviors, harmful beliefs when we see them, to improve the environment both for ourselves and for the people who come into this industry after us. I really believe the tech industry can be a beautiful place if we all work together to clean it up and keep it that way. Thank you.